Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of World War II's most fascinating and frankly weirdest stories, the Battles of Narvik. This is the story of the first major Allied land victory of the entire war, a victory they immediately had to just walk away from, turning what should have been a triumph into a strategic disaster.
So, back in the spring of 1940, this little-known town in Norway, Narvik, suddenly becomes one of the most important places on the planet. And it's not because of its people or its size. It all came down to what was passing through its harbor, which, crucially, was ice-free all year round, incredibly high-grade iron ore.
So you have to ask, what was it about this remote port that was so critical it sparked this brutal 2-month-long fight between 5 different countries? Well, the answer actually lies just across the border, deep in the mountains of Sweden. Look, Germany's entire war machine, we're talking its tanks, its ships, its guns, everything, it absolutely depended on a constant flow of this specific iron ore. And in the winter, when the Baltic Sea froze solid, the only reliable way to get that ore out and down to German factories was on a railway that ended in Narvik. For Hitler, securing that supply line wasn't just important, it was non-negotiable. So Hitler knew this was a major weak spot. And he also knew the Allies were thinking about making a move on Narvik themselves. So he decided to strike first with a really bold preemptive attack. It was codenamed Operation Weserübung, and the plan was simple. Grab Norway in a lightning-fast raid and lock down that iron ore flow for good. Picture this. It's the morning of April 9th, 1940. A fleet of 10 German destroyers, crammed with almost 2,000 elite mountain troops, is quietly steaming into the Ofo fjord, using a heavy snowstorm for cover. Their mission was to take Narvik fast, and if at all possible, without firing a shot. But the Norwegians, they weren't about to just hand their country over. The German lead ship radioed the old Norwegian coastal defense ship, the Eidsvold, and demanded it surrender. The response from its captain, Willoch, was legendary. Even though they were completely, hopelessly outgunned, they fought back. And in that moment, as German torpedoes struck home, a bitter 2-month battle had begun. The German surprise attack was, a stunning success. But that success was going to be incredibly short-lived. The British Royal Navy, though caught totally off guard, moved with absolutely blistering speed to plan a counterattack. And this is just unbelievably bold. Just one day after the invasion, a small British force of only 5 destroyers, led by Commodore Warburton Lee, sails right into that narrow, dangerous fjord. They knew they were going up against a German force that was double their size, but they were betting they could catch them by surprise, low on fuel. And the gamble worked. They sank 2 German destroyers and even killed the German commander. Now, that first battle was a chaotic, brutal fight. Both sides actually lost 2 destroyers. But the British? Oh, they were far from done. They came back just 3 days later, and this time they brought the big guns, spearheaded by the massive battleship HMS Warspite. And the final body count from these 2 naval battles is it's staggering. In the end, all 10 of the German destroyers that had sailed so confidently into that fjord were now at the bottom of it, either sunk in combat or deliberately scuttled by their own crews when they ran out of ammo. An entire naval invasion force, just gone. I mean, stop and think about that. In less than a week, Germany had successfully captured the port they wanted, but in doing so, they lost 50% of their entire destroyer fleet, and it left thousands of German sailors stranded ashore, forced to pick up rifles and fight as infantry. So, with the German Navy literally at the bottom of the fjord, the entire conflict just completely changes. It shifts from a naval battle at sea to a grueling land war fought in the freezing, unforgiving mountains all around Narvik. And this put the Germans in a really, really tough spot. Their elite mountain troops, now beefed up by about 2,600 shipwrecked sailors, were suddenly outnumbered more than 4-1 by an Allied force that was getting bigger by the day. And what a force it was. A truly international army was put together to press the attack. You had determined local Norwegian troops fighting for their homes, British soldiers, elite French mountain specialists, hardened veterans from the French Foreign Legion, and even a highly motivated Polish brigade. The fighting was just brutal. Slow, grinding work in some of the most difficult terrain you can imagine. But with the Allies controlling the sea and with way more troops on the ground, a German defeat started to look less like a possibility and more like an inevitability. Okay, so all of this fighting, this slow, uphill battle, it's all leading to the climax of the campaign. After weeks of pushing the Germans back foot by foot, the Allies are finally ready. They're going to launch the big one, the final assault to take back the town of Narvik itself. And they did it. On May 28th, after almost 2 full months of combat, the Allies achieved their goal. Taking back Narvik was a huge tactical win and just an incredible boost for morale. It was the first time in the war that German forces had been soundly beaten in a land battle. But then, something happens that makes no sense at all. Right after winning this incredibly hard-fought victory, the Allied troops immediately start packing their bags to leave. So what on earth was going on? Well, the reason wasn't in Norway at all. It was hundreds of miles away, in Western Europe. The Battle of France was turning into an absolute catastrophe for the Allies. With France about to collapse, Britain suddenly needed every single soldier, every ship, and every plane it could get its hands on to defend its own coastline from a German invasion. And so, the evacuation, which was codenamed Operation Alphabet, marked this really bitter, ironic end to the whole Norwegian campaign. The victory at Narvik was about to be handed right back to the enemy they had just defeated. Now, while the German Navy took a beating, the Allies paid a heavy price too. And most tragically, during the evacuation itself, the aircraft carrier HMS Glorious and its 2 escorting destroyers were caught by German battlecruisers and sunk, with a loss of over 1,500 lives. And this, right here, brings us to the ultimate paradox of this whole campaign. The Battle of Narvik is a perfect textbook example of winning the battle, but losing the war. That local success was completely wiped out by the strategic disaster that was unfolding in France. For the Germans, it was an unbelievable stroke of luck, of victories snatched right from the jaws of certain defeat. The Allied withdrawal meant they could just walk back into Narvik without firing a shot, securing that vital iron ore route for the next 5 years of the war. The story of Narvik is just this powerful, bitter lesson that in a giant global war, a single victory, no matter how heroically it's won, can be made totally meaningless by a disaster happening somewhere else on the map. It really makes you question what it even means to win a battle.